Okay, well, we'll see if the hits keep coming with the first time that we're going to be doing Roxy music for your pleasure. And we did mention Roxy music when we did Bryan Eno, Another Green World, in an earlier full length Combing the Stacks. Matt is going to start this one off, and I'm going to go second. Josh will go last. He'll run the numbers in a second. But to put it all together, this is their second studio album, and it is the last album with Bryan Eno as a member of the band, to give a benchmark of where we're at. Okay. And like I said, I'll add context as needed as you guys give your takes. I am not going to bring it in my segment until you guys have shared stuff, so as not to drive the conversation. Sound good? Yep. Matt, run the numbers for us, and then go ahead into your take.
So this is number 351 in Rolling Stone's list. Another one we almost covered in the regular episodes. Number 112 in the 1970s on Best Ever Albums currently. Number 13 in 1973, and number 485 of all time. And this is their highest ranked album on Best Ever Albums. And this is another good example of an album that's really hard to listen to once and give a cogent take on after just one listen, because this album is all over the place. This is we were talking about art rock last week with Pink Floyd. This is definitely falls into that category, I would say, of art rock. There is a lot of stuff going on here, but some stuff that kind of stood out to me. First and foremost, the vocals. It's Bryan. Is it Bryan Ferry? Is he the lead vocalist? Is that?
You are correct. It's Bryan Ferry. He's the writer of all the tracks too.
All right, so Bryan Ferry's vocals, dramatic is a term that came to mind often in this this record.
Yeah, good word.
And also kind of Bowie-esque with the type of, in terms of like the deeper sounds that Bowie can make with his voice. And a lot of vibrato that he's using. So that's when you're kind of like, fluctuating back and forth within the note. It's like opera singers. Think of opera singers that can kind of,
You're taking all my notes, Matt.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, I mean, it's not hard to see. It's like, these are the easy takes to, to bring up with a complicated album like this. Lots of instruments happening here. Lots of saxophone, maybe the oboes in there somewhere, variety of
or like
keyboard.
A clarinet maybe or something?
Something like, lots of woodwinds. Yeah, woodwinds, keyboard sounds are varied, which is not surprising because, with Bryan Eno being in there. I heard some free jazz in here. There's some jazzy elements as well. So overall, I think I did like it. There is enough keeping me going here to keep me interested. Kind of eerie. That's the other thing too that I kind of thought of is a lot of these, the sound and the tone of a lot of these songs is very like Halloween-esque almost, it's kind of like eerie, trying to spook you out a little bit. I'm thinking about like, is he going to start singing about, ghosts and goblins and stuff? Like in every dream home, a heartache in particular. And that also, I was thinking of Lou Reed for some reason in that song too.
Do you know what that song's about?
No.
Did you catch it in the I didn't catch it in the lyrics, but I was profoundly interested in it, so once I got my take, I'll share later what it's about. It's not what you think, and you'll laugh. But
I don't think anything really. I just think, wow, that sounds creepy. But
it ain't ghosts and goblins.
It's almost like spoken word in some way.
Yeah, and they flanging like that. There's a lot of effects that they're doing, like studio-wise effects. I like the Bogus Man. That's the long song on here, and it's got this cool beat that kind of stays steady throughout the song. It's like 9+ minutes, I think. But it's got a really cool guitar part midway. It goes into this extended jam. It's another. Actually, all these songs are pretty unique. I think the only one that I didn't like outright, or the one that I disliked outright from start to finish was the last track, For Your Pleasure. Didn't. It's a little too repetitive, and what they were repeating was not terribly interesting to me. There was too much space. It was too long. It wasn't doing enough. I didn't really care for that. But so Bowie, dramatic, stuff all over the place, like lots of instrumentation, and art rock. And I liked it. This one would take more listens to really get a hold of. But that's my initial take.
Well, you know why the song sounded eerie to you, Matt? Because they're creepy, and they're very oblique, not oblique strategies, which is, I said that without even thinking Eno, but here. So I always feel that a lot of Eno's music music sounds that way. And Ferry writes lyrics that I would kind of describe as a better version of the American Psycho guy. Like it's just that Patrick Bateman, he thinks he's a romantic, but he's actually like a serial killer. And it's kind of funny because that show Mindhunter actually featured a Roxy Music song. I remember when it was playing, I was like, oh, I know Roxy Music quite a bit because, as we mentioned before, my buddy Jeff, this is his favorite band ever. So before knowing it, I knew this was the album that the tension between Ferry and Eno exploded. Ferry wanted to kind of keep that, what became the new romantic sound that's sort of grounded in traditional rock a little bit, with the uncomfortable lyrics celebrating sex, but also dark themes, and sort of what the Velvet Underground pined in, that kind of world. And Eno kind of wanted the soundscape, and they were both, Ferry's a very big personality, and Eno in his own way is a big personality, but in the way that someone who's quiet tries to steer the conversation by not engaging, whereas Ferry's more of an engager. And that's a little bit of the background here. I was familiar with that before I listened to this. The lyrics are creepy, and I couldn't figure out exactly what they were about, so I went afterwards, and you wouldn't be surprised to know, as you mentioned, the Bogus Man's about like a sexual stalker. In Every Dream Home, a Heartache is sort of it's about like a blow-up doll, but falling in love with it. It's funny because like when you listen to it and you find out a little bit what it's about, it fits, but because it's so obscure a little bit, you can kind of apply it to pretty much anything. But yeah, the lyrics and the vibe are decidedly eerie, which is why calling it For Your Pleasure is kind of like wink wink nod nod, right? It's a little it's a little bit, what to whose pleasure, it does the female voice at the end, I was like, where does that voice come from? And it's Judi Dench. And so I was like, how about that? I didn't even put two and two together, but I recognized the voice. I'm like, I wonder who that is.
Dame Judi Dench, John.
Dame Judi Dench, yeah.
Dame.
But this, this album sounds like so much stuff that came after it, doesn't it? I look at like, this is what happens when you take the Velvet Underground and you take the next evolution of what that sound is, and then you can see that this ends up in places like goth music. I know this is one of Morrissey's favorite albums of all time. Okay, surprise.
Yeah,
in fact, I think it is his favorite album of all time, if I remember correctly. So that crooning style, right? Could come right from Bryan Ferry. Not to mention, the new romantic sound that was in the early '80s that we will cover at that time. Heavily has a debt from this. I really like this album. It's creepy. It's not an album that makes you feel comfortable. It's genre bending all over the place. And there's like virtuoso playing at times, like on the sax and on the guitar, but then it's not present all the way around. This is in the same lane as what the krautrock guys were doing, but with a decidedly British feel to it, as opposed to a German feel. Because to me, this sounds like British music that would come for the next 12 to 15 years, whereas krautrock is at the same time, but decidedly is divorced from that sound. But like krautrock, it doesn't sound as much rooted in anything American or traditional jazz or R&B. The American sounds that come up. This is its own place. And yeah, I like this album a lot. Roxy Music keeps making albums, but they never sound like this again, because the fusion of Ferry and Eno is such an interesting combination, and Eno is messing around with all kinds of different stuff. It's even got elements, guys, of like glam rock on this album a little bit, and it's in that era. But yeah, a really strong album. It's very dark. It's very pseudosexual lyrically. It's very avant-garde in terms of the sound, and it's very British in terms of the overall vibe of it as well. that's the best way I can describe it, like a cacophony of influences. And once again, it looks backwards to things like the Velvet Underground. It's very much of its moment in 1973, and it very much sounds like stuff that would be coming the next 10 to 15 years. So it's all over the place there, but yeah, strong recommend for me. Josh, your take?
Yeah, another eye-catching album. A woman in a dress with a panther on a leash. So that really grabs you, right?
Well,
right
Roxy Music is known for putting beautiful women on the cover. In fact, some of the
in some cases naked women.
Yeah.
Yeah, they always find like really attractive women too. It's you know, when you look at their albums from the 70s, it's like, woof, they know how to pick them. But
Yeah.
Continue, Josh. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of same thoughts that you guys did. I made that Morrissey connection with the voice of Bryan Ferry right from the get-go. It reminded me of Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's really kind of got that like campy vibe, and the sound of the music from Rocky Horror. It also reminded me a lot of Meatloaf at certain points.
But he plays it darker than both of those, because
Yeah.
you never know if he's serious or not. Kind of like
Yeah.
with the Velvet Underground, you know.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of genre bending here. I got a lot of like dance music at the beginning, but that kind of transitions away. And then the main thing that I heard was like the horns. They kind of keep you on edge in this album, and they provide like a dissonant sort of sound to everything else that's going on. So you have this kind of underlying rumble, but then like or tempo that or tempo or sound that kind of stays throughout the entire song, but then like that horns will blast at different times throughout the album, and that happens over and over again on this. There's also a lot of pounding piano, like almost like at a honky tonk or something, but not that honky tonk like rock music sound. It's more, I don't know what it is. It's
I was getting Jerry Lee Lewis
okay,
kind of piano.
yeah.
Well, that's Bryan Ferry, and
Okay.
he has that piano sound at different times throughout their catalog. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you picked that up pretty well.
Yeah, and also some in that Bowie-esque way, kind of like Blue-Eyed Soul too. I feel like they're trying to sing these types of sad, almost R&B songs, but in a completely like different way. So that reminded me of a little bit of Station to Station, since we talked about that recently. And then Matt said a lot of good adjectives. I got a haunting vibe out of it. It felt ethereal and dreamlike to me as well. And I wrote down, it's definitely an art rock album. That was the main takeaway. But an art rock in a different way that the Pink Floyd was. But there's a lot of
Art rock is a easy
Right,
term,
broad.
umbrella term to use for
Yeah.
just stuff that's weird and different, you know.
Yeah, that's true. Good
and
point.
experimental. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's I'd say that art rock for me has always been anything that is not conventional in terms of what has come before it, or it can be what is not conventional in terms of at the time what's popular. And the problem with using art rock for a lot of the stuff in the mid 70s now is that lots of people are making art rock. So to me, then it's like, it's like using alternative in the 90s or using psychedelic in the 60s. It's like, this is a period where art rock just blasted through, sometimes in the charts and sometimes in a way that influenced people after it. So I always try to go back to like, what is the sound I'm hearing here? And for me, it's what you guys mentioned. It's that combination of crooning mixed with brass used in a way to hammer home ideas. The percussion is largely coming from the piano and the synthesizers in this, which is kind of to me a hallmark of art rock a lot of times, that the drumming is more it's there, but it's also being backed up by synthesizers and piano as the rhythm section. The Mellotron's on here for sure. I think it's the Mellotron. I was trying to figure out. I know Eno's also playing another synthesizer. It's not the ARP, but it's a different one. It has a different sound. I feel like by the end of the mid 70s, I'm actually gonna be able to tell these synthesizers apart, because they're all over the place. But and the different electric pianos, in this case, Ferry's using something called the Hohner Planet, so a different type of electric piano than the electric piano on the previous album, and a different set of synthesizers than the synthesizers are on the other album. So, yeah,
it's not really an album that's built around hooks either. It's more of like vibes and repetition and like kind of building, I don't know, just creating the feeling, I guess, more than anything. They're not really trying to create like some 3-minute pop song. They're
experimenting.
Yeah, they're doing something else.
But they're still doing it within, certain confines. It's not totally out there. There's still hooks and grooves and stuff like that. I mean, not big hooks, but there's catchy elements in there, for sure.
Well, and to finish off something, the cover model on this was Amanda Lear is the name of the cover model. She was Bryan Ferry's girlfriend. She was also a Salvador Dali muse as well. She is an interesting character. She reminds me of that one woman who dated Miles Davis, the French actress.
I was just thinking of her. Yeah.
Yep, the ingenue kind of. And
what was her?
I just in reading a little bit about her Wikipedia page is a mile long, and I urge anybody who is curious to look her up, because boy, is she one of these people with a life that not many have led. But that's who the cover model is on this.
Juliet Greco was Miles Davis's
Juliet Greco
love interest.
Go.
Yeah.
And
also,
go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
I was going to say she sold 27 million albums herself, Lear. So
damn,
yeah,
good for her. No, I was just going to say I looked up Morrissey's favorite albums. You know what else is on there?
New York Dolls.
White Light, White Heat. Well, yes, the New York Dolls, but also White Light, White Heat, and Chelsea Girl.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, I mean, Morrissey.
He's got his problems too. Then.
Yeah. Morrissey was the head of the Velvet Underground fan club in England, I think, in the late 70s. I know that's a huge part of his origin story. So yeah, that's where he was, and so it makes sense that you would like this, Nico, and Velvet Underground with that background.
Well, also on there is the Velvet Underground and Nico, so he has two Velvet Underground albums. But yes, I also was laughing because I was like, New York Dolls, there you go. So this is the Morrissey evening.
Yep, it really is.
Yeah, and the Velvet Underground, I wrote them down for New York Dolls too.
He's got some good taste. But hey, we'll get to the New York Dolls in a little bit. I would say it sounds like I have the strongest like on this. I really like this album. This is going to be in my top 15% of albums in the 70s. I really like the sound of this. I like anything that's as accessible as this is while also being as discomforting as this is. That's a very difficult line to walk, and they pulled it off. So congratulations, Roxy Music.
Yeah, I'm also positive on this album. I was kind of shocked that it was a 73 album. It definitely feels later in the decade to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like
Even
it as
though
well.
I know ahead of time.
I like it as well. Yeah, I would need more time with this before I go like, oh my god, I love it. So it's got potential. Like the Lou Reed Berlin album. I think it's similar to that. That there's a lot of interesting stuff here that I could see getting better over time.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the albums we're doing on Cold List and Hot Take are the ones that demand multiple listens, and then the ones we're getting on the regular show, like Dark Side of the Moon and Boston, it's kind of like, well, I feel like I got a feel for that, so it's we're getting some, but it's interesting.